Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Advantage Over podcast. I'm Keith Lewis, your host, and we're very grateful that you're with us today. A special episode in episode 17. We've just had the announcement from World Rugby of the 23 strong squad for the Rugby World Cup in Japan starting in September. Team 21 as it's being known as, obviously 20 other teams making up the playing squad, but Team 21 making up the refereeing and match official squad for the showcase tournament, which starts later in the year. So some really obviously proud people around the rugby referee community today, and I'm sure everyone who knows any of the officials who are going to Japan will be very proud to have been working with them or been supporting them or following them. And for those of you who aren't referees and just followed them as referees as they come up through their careers and built their refereeing development pathways, you'll hopefully be have a little bit of a thought for them as they head to their World Cups. So Alain Rolland announced that yesterday. The squad is made up of 3 different groups, 12 referees, 7 assistant referees, one of whom has been named as a specific dedicated reserve referee, just in case any of the people on the ground get injured or ill. Then Matthew Carley will be the reserve referee, named as one of the assistant referees, and then 4 TMOs as well. Obviously, the Alain Rolland had already set out at the start of the year, before in fact, last year when the Six Nations appointments were announced, that they would be selecting 12 of the 14 referees that were used in that tournament for Rugby World Cup. And obviously everyone else that was involved as well will be playing for their part. So the Six Nations has been thoroughly reviewed, all the matches have been gone through and all the analysis has been done, and the selection committee have made their choices. So from the 14, 2 referees don't make the final referee squad for World Cup. We've already mentioned Matthew Carley, he was one of them. Unfortunately, I think a calf injury at the start of the year in a European Cup competition came at the worst possible time for him. But at the age of 34, he's probably got at least 1, if not 2, World Cups ahead of him, and he's just broken into that top tier referee panel, and I'm sure it will keep going on. So, but I think he'll probably count himself as unlucky. But again, we'll be going as the reserve referee, as one of the 7 assistant referees. So that's positive there. So not the most difficult call for Alain, I guess, to have made in the last couple of weeks. But the more difficult one, I guess, was to Glenn Jackson in New Zealand. I think over 30 tests now at international level since making the step from being a full-time professional player into the refereeing ranks down in New Zealand. I guess for many people would have exceeded expectations to have got as far as he reached the levels that he did. And let's not forget, he did go as a referee to Rugby World Cup 2015. So did one tournament, but sadly didn't make this year's tournament. And the mood music coming out of New Zealand is that potentially he will referee in Super Rugby for this season before looking at re-evaluating his future career choices, whether he goes into referee coaching, referee training. But obviously with a playing background behind him, it's really crucial. It's really important for him. He can use all the skills that he's developed there to make those choices that he does in his next stage of his career. So we obviously wish him well, and recognise the heights that he got to as a referee. So the 12 referees that have been named, we have 4 from France. We have Pascal Gauzer, Romain Poit, Jerome Garcet and Mathieu Reynal. We have 2 from England, so Wayne Barnes at his 4th World Cup, and Luke Pearce at the other end in his World Cup debut. We then have Jaco Piper from South Africa. We have Nigel Owens, the most experienced test referee in the world, with 87 tests to his name so far, while making his 4th festival at Rugby World Cup. The New Zealand referees are represented with the whistle by Paul Williams, and in his first World Cup, one of the most inexperienced on the panel, but between him and Nick Berry are coming through there. The other referee from New Zealand will be Ben O'Keefe, who is the baby of the party at the ripe old age of just 30. He takes that mantle just behind Luke Pearce at 31. So the final country represented at Rugby World Cup will be Australia, and we have 2 referees there. Nick Berry, as I've just mentioned there, one of the other inexperienced group, will be making his debut. Again, making really good progress as a match official, as a referee, doing some great work in rugby, in Super Rugby, but has also made the most of having 2 appointments in the Six Nations this year. The only referee of the 14 to get 2 appointments, so obviously did enough during those 2 games to earn his place. And the final referee, also from Australia, is Angus Gardner, the World Rugby Referee of the Year for last year. Had a really good season, cemented his place in the top level of the referee elite panel. So congratulations to Nick and Gus representing Australia. And that makes up the 12 referees who will be going to Rugby World Cup starting in September. We're awaiting the news of the summer appointments to see how those referees will be used over the next couple of months before the squad meet in July. As we'll hear in a minute from Alain Rolland, they're going to gather them all together in July ahead of the summer tournaments, the summer friendlies, the Tri Nations tournament, not friendly, but the competitive competition there will be refereed obviously by all these officials. They'll be spread out, I guess, all over the world as those warm-up games happen, and they'll get the experience of refereeing, I guess, in the top tier ones, but also as we saw last summer, don't be surprised to see some of those referees out in places like Fiji and Georgia and Canada and all those countries who still need to be refereed by these top tier officials, won't have had as much experience, as much face time with them over the years as the other one. So we'll see how those appointments come through. So those are the 12 referees. On the assistant referees front, we already have Matthew Carney, we've already talked about. We then have Carl Dixon, I think the newest referee as part of the squad, only turned professional last season in the RFU after a very lengthy career in professional rugby at Harlequins. So he'll be going at the age of 36 to his first tournament at Rugby World Cup, and I'll be very pleased with his progress there. Ireland, for the first time, there aren't any Irish referees refereeing. That's the first time ever at a Rugby World Cup. But Andrew Brace will be there as a referee. Again, his injury in the Six Nations last year, I think it was, probably came at the wrong time for him. It wasn't. It was the Autumn Internationals last year when he came off a game in Italy, I think it was, which kind of put him out of the reckoning, I think, for Six Nations, and then obviously from the World Cup pool as well. A fellow Kiwi to add to the New Zealand referees, Brendan Pickerel has picked up a slot as an assistant referee at the age of 29. I think the youngest of the whole squad, but he's been coming through Super Rugby for quite some time now, refereed 13, so 14 as assistant referee, 3 international tests, having started last year with Germany versus the USA. From other countries outside of the norm, Federico Anselmi from Argentina, a familiar face to many of us, been ARing in the Six Nations. He's been in the Super Rugby panel for a number of years now, and it's great to see Argentina represented for the first time at Rugby World Cup since Pablo De Luca. So it's good to see Bolly making that step into World Cup again. He was at 2015 and carries on into 2019. And then the home appointment, Japan's Shui Kubo takes charge of a flag at Rugby World Cup 2019, which is great to see. Those kind of lesser known officials coming through on the world stage. Shui's been involved in World Rugby and Super Rugby for a number of years now. 13 tests to his name so far. And the final of the 7 assistant referees is another Frenchman. So Alex Ruiz of France, been around for a while, both as a relatively senior referee within the French circuit. And there's an awful lot of them, so it's hard to get the top level space for Alex. But he's been at Rugby World Cup under-20s a number of times there, and has continued to his development, so he'll be there as the 7th assistant referee. So then we look at the TMOs. World Rugby had already said that they would take 4 TMOs. They already said that. And if you look back at the appointments to Six Nations, it was kind of expected that those 4 officials would select themselves, to be honest. it was already, if you look at those who are regularly used, who have been used at international rugby level for a number of years now, Ben Skeen of New Zealand, so he will travel. Marius Jonker has kind of picked up the South African TMO space after Sean Velsman had a number of years there, but so Marius Jonker's kind of overtaken him, and he's been the sort of lead South African TMO. And Rowan Kitt from the RFU would be the third name penciled in. I think reasonably senior, been around for a number of years, and has worked with a lot of the RFU officials as when they've been refereeing. Obviously, the likes of Wayne Barnes and Luke Pearce as well coming through. So seeing Kitty on the side there, not a surprise for Kitty to have moved into the TMO ranks and to lead that field. And I think that the expectation around the circuit would be to keep a number of the number of TMOs from as many countries as possible. Simon McDowell was probably the name that was on most people's list, but that fourth slot has been taken by Graham Hughes, who will be at his third Rugby World Cup, having been at 2011 with 10 TMO appearances and then 12 in Rugby World Cup 2015. So he'll be going to his third Rugby World Cup, but that does mean that there are two English TMOs, one New Zealand TMO and one South African TMO. So I suspect there'll be a little bit of nervousness around the selection group for the quarterfinals and beyond to see which teams get there, because if you get an England-New Zealand final or semi-final, the TMO therefore picks themselves. So they'll be hoping that all those four officials stay on top form, stay out of controversy, stick to the protocols that we're working to, and those I guess will be clarified over the summer to be sure there's nothing new for World Cup. They'll be hoping that there's no controversy based there, so that the appointments are the right appointments for the games that are in front of them. So perhaps a surprise there if we're looking at the decisions that were made by Anthony Buchanan and the selection squad with Alain Rolland in there. I think the two decisions that had to be made was which of the two referees to miss out, and therefore the TMO decisions as well. So not as clear cut a series of panel, not a clear-cut selection series, I guess, by any means. We'll hear from Alain Rolland now and see his thoughts about how hard those decisions were, and the choices that he had to make with the selection panel, and from those that and what happens next. So obviously it's May now. The World Cup kicks off in September. So a number of months now, so we've got to get through the summer appointments, the rest of the Super Rugby season, the International Series, the Tri-Nations, the Pacific Nations Cup, so plenty of appointments there. So let's hear from Alain speaking as the announcements were made as to his thoughts about how things progress from here.
It was probably the most difficult decisions that we've had to make as a group. And that stems back to what our objective was. I said 3 years ago when I took on this position is that we wanted to have that conversation within the group, because in previous World Cups they haven't necessarily had to spend a long period as discussing who you're going to leave out, because we may not necessarily have had, or there were not the same resources of referees that you could select to actually put into Rugby World Cup. And over the last 3 years the guys have been working really hard to put their hands up. Going into the Six Nations, we had 14 referees refereeing the Six Nations, and out of that we had to pick 12. So we had a pretty robust discussion within the group. We looked at a number of factors in relation to where the referees currently are, how they've been refereeing over the last number of years, how they have been doing, working collectively from a team perspective. And we're now at a situation where we feel that we've been pretty confident that we've selected a very good squad, good balance of experience, and we'll have a couple of guys that would be coming in for the first World Cups, because we also need to look at 2019, but also with a view to succession for 2023.
Thanks, Alain. Can you give us a clue as to what happens next, and what will Rugby World Cup look like when you get to September?
From here we'll get the squad together in Japan in July, and the focus is now going to be on the warm-up games as well as the Rugby World Cup. So during the 40 pool games, the referees on average are going to be doing 3 if not 4 games, and then the AORs they'll be doing, I haven't put an exact figure on the number of matches that they'll be doing. The TMOs have about 10 games each, so that's initially the pool games. From there, once the pool games have actually finished, well then as a selection group we will reconvene and have a discussion around, well, how the performances have gone. Now the performances we would kind of review on the go on a daily basis, because we're in a group, we'll be able to review them as they happen. But as a selection group, we would actually sit down on the Monday after the final pool game, I think is the 13th, and to decide, well, which referees will we be putting forward for the quarterfinals.
So just looking at the health and fitness and the strength and conditioning of the referees in the squad, how are you going to make sure they hit September in peak physical fitness, given they're at the end of the season for some, or in the middle of the season for others? How does that work out?
So the S&C coaches of each of the unions are working with the S&C coach that we have for World Rugby, with Matt. And now that we know who the squad actually is going to be, who's doing what within the squad, we'll take into account the number of warm-up games and other games that are involved, as mentioned to you, within PNC. We've got the Rugby Championship games that are to be played, which go all the way up to September. So we'll have to look at what games are going to be involved in and tailor that in with their current training routines to ensure that by the time they get to Japan in September, that they'll be arriving in peak condition.
So you're happy with the balance and the opportunity ahead for these guys?
We have a great balance, a good mixture of a squad that have great experience, that have been around for a number of World Cups, and we also have a number of referees coming in now that'll be doing their first World Cup, which is very, very exciting.
And as we've just heard from Rolland, it's interesting to see how their thinking was, how hard those decisions were that they had to make, but also the breadth of experience that he's got in the 23-man squad as Team 21 going into September and the Rugby World Cup. So it's good to see referees from all over the world. Obviously the main tier 1 nations are the ones that deliver most of the officials, but it's good to see others coming from around the world as well, so that's a positive. He's talked there about the blend of experience that he's got. We've got some really experienced international test match officials out there as part of this team. Nigel Owens, 87, the world record test referee. Wayne Barnes, only 4 tests behind him. And then you've got the likes of Romain Poit as well, who's on 60 odd tests. We've got Jaco Piper on 46. So some really experienced guys there. But undoubtedly, some of those, this will be their last tournament. So as Rolland's explained there, they are already looking ahead to 2023. And I'm sure that many of those who are on debut this time in 2019 will be the core group of referees for 2023. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But that aside, it might be 6 of them might be on debut, and a number of the assistant referees and TMOs are also on World Cup debut. But that doesn't mean they're inexperienced match officials. Of those 23-man squad, there are 554 international tests amongst them, and that includes those guys, so the TMOs, the ARs who have test experience as well. There are 677 international assistant referee matches amongst all those referees as well. And as the TMOs, 217 international TMO appointments across the 4 of them. So real experience there. It'll be great to watch over the summer now as they build up. It'll be interesting to see what happens when the team gets together in July. In Japan for that real start of that team building. Matt Rolland, the World Rugby strength and conditioning coach, will be keeping a very close eye on off-season diets and training plans and making sure that they hit Japan in peak physical fitness. It's going to be an immense tournament. The match officials have a crucial role to play in making sure that we get that tournament and it's delivered to the expectations. And it is the showcase event for World Rugby. We have the best match officials that will be there overseeing those games, and we'll be keeping a very close eye on it as we go through. We'll be hoping to get some feet on the ground in Japan to get some up close and personal content from Japan as how those referees build up and how they go through their 6 to 7 weeks in camp, and as that goes through. So do keep coming back to RugbyReferee.Net. We'll bring you those stories when we get them. And if you want to think about if the idea of refereeing is in your minds and you want to emulate some of these characters, then please do take the opportunity to watch them at play, to watch them at work, to see how they referee. If you want to come and talk about refereeing matters, you're very welcome to do that through RugbyReferee.Net. We have a really active Facebook community now. So if you head to facebook.com/groups/RugbyReferee.Net, you will find our community. There's a couple of questions that we asked just to make sure that we're letting referees or people with a specific interest in refereeing in there. And we'd love to hear from you, to help you with your refereeing, to help you understand what these guys are all about and how they are moving forward into their elite end of the refereeing, the pinnacle of their careers to some extent at Rugby World Cup. So hopefully you found the podcast of interest. We'll be keeping a very close eye and ear. We hope to speak to some of those, that squad of 23 over the next couple of months, if we're allowed to, if we can get into them, to bring you those voices and to hear what they're looking forward to, how they're going to approach September and October. So keep checking back. We'll bring you that podcast. We'll bring you those podcasts. We'll hopefully bring you a bit more video content. So let us know what you're interested in, what you want us to cover, what questions you've got, what issues you want us to discuss and debate, whether that's law queries, whether it's approach, whether it's protocols, whether it's anything to do with refereeing at your level, at this level. We're here to help you with your refereeing. So let us know. You can find us across social media at RugbyReferee.Net, at RugbyReferee.Net on social media handles that don't allow you to have full stops in them. Or you can go old school and send us an email at ref@rugbyreferee.net, and we'll happily pick those up to do that. If you'd like to come on the podcast and ask a question, audio wise, get your mobile phone device out, find the voice recorder system on there, and send us a file with that audio clip, and we'll get that on the podcast and we'll answer it for you. So it's something we've done before, and we'd love to do a bit more of that. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, we're going to start to place these podcasts in video format onto YouTube as well. If you want to ask a video question, by all means, we'll do that, and we'll get that into the edit as well. So thank you very much for joining us. Hope you found that an interesting couple of minutes looking ahead to Rugby World Cup 2019. Congratulations to all those match officials who I know listen to it. Some of those 23 will be listening now. Congratulations to you. If you do want to come on the podcast, we look forward to giving you the chance to do that. And we'll catch up with you soon. So that's it for now. Advantage over.